Thank you, Arnaud. And effectively, we're going to talk about sustainable finance at COP26 in Glasgow. 2030, 2050, those deadlines might ring a bell when it comes to decarbonization and climate change statements. Yet the very next stop for the financial industry regarding those topics remains the COP26 in Glasgow next November. Of course, the Paris Financial Place has drawn a number of proposals that I'm happy to discuss today with 5 top-notch panelists. Therefore, joining us today on stage are Valérie Baudson, Chief Executive Officer of Amundi and Chair of the Investor Committee at Paris EUROPLACE, Thierry Deo, CEO of Meridium, and also Chairman of Finance for Tomorrow. And we are also joined online with 3 more speakers, including Lorenzo Bini-Smaghi, Chairman of the Boards of Directors of Société Générale, Philippe Haim, Chairman of the Boards of Directors of La Banque Postale, and finally, Christian Gaulier, Professor Christian Gaulier from the Toulouse School of Economics. And he is also the President of the European Association of Environmental and Resource Economists. Thank you for joining us today. Let me kickstart this session with Christian. Christian, there is one topic that will be at the center of the next COP26, one topic which is carbon pricing. Carbon pricing is core to the ongoing decarbonization process that we see happening at the moment. My question would be, how should states, financial corporates act on carbon pricing in that context of decarbonization?
Thank you for the invitation to this very exciting event. Well, we need to understand that there is a myriad of possible action to reduce emission. And it's very crucial to select, at least in the short run, the action that are the least costly. We have seen in France the Yellow Vest movement that demonstrate that, it's not only the end of the world that matters, but also the end of the month. And so the impact of the transition on purchasing power of household is very important. So we need to find first the action that are the least costly in terms of cost per ton of CO2 saved. So the consequence of that is that we need to determine a cutoff cost of the cutoff cost per ton of CO2 saved, and that we call it the carbon value. And so we need to first act in reducing emission by selecting the action that have a cost per ton of CO2 saved that is less than this value of carbon. And this value of carbon could start at around 80, 100 euros per ton of CO2 in 2021, and they should grow at something like 4 to 5% per year in real term. That would be necessary to be compatible with the 55% reductions of emission with respect to 1990, so with respect for 2030. And so the problem is, how can we get there? One possibility, one simple possibility is to enlarge the scope of the EU ETS system to all sectors, not only industry and electricity, but also transport and residential sector. So any emitters of CO2 should face this value of carbon so that it has a private interest to make all the actions that has a cost per ton of CO2 saved that is smaller than that price. That's exactly the idea. And so we should enlarge the scope of the EU ETS and also having a carbon border adjustment mechanism in order to make sure that we have a level playing field across the world with respect to European producers. Finally, we have a problem of political acceptability. That is, with such a large price of carbon, we clearly demonstrated that there will be costs for the people, and most people don't like that. So in the short run, that price will not be large enough to attain the objective. So maybe there is a motivation here for private investor and private actors, insurer, pension fund, banks, central banks to do something. And the best way to do something would be to have an internal price of carbon. So I suggest that banks use a price of carbon that corresponds to this 50, 100 euros per ton of CO2 to determine what are the investments that are socially desirable and what should be an investment that should be eliminated from their portfolio.
So concretely, Christian, what does a rising carbon price imply as impacts to a fair transition?
Well, fairness is indeed a problem. It's a problem in particular because we know that poorer households devote a larger fraction of their purchasing power to energy expenditure. So any climate policy that has the consequence to increase the price of energy is regressive. So take, for example, the case of feed-in tariff for solar and wind electricity. The consequence of those mechanisms is to raise the price of electricity and the electricity bill for poor people, as for wealthy people. But because poor people devote a larger fraction of their income to this electricity purchase, this is regressive. One important advantage of a carbon price mechanism is that generates a fiscal revenue, a carbon dividend that can be used to redistribute and to eliminate the regressivity nature of the carbon pricing mechanism.
Christian, almost every state, every company has set up 2050 as a deadline for a net zero carbon world. How ambitious, how realistic is that target in your view?
Well, keep in mind first that it's a collective target. I mean, it's very hard to say whether a specific company is compatible with the net zero emission by the year 2050. There are sectors that are much more difficult to decarbonize than others. And it's natural and desirable that we first focus on sectors where it's easy to decarbonize, for example, electricity sector. But it's true. This target of zero net emission by the year 2050 is extremely ambitious. Nobody knows today what will be the look of a European economy fully decarbonized by that time. Maybe the price of carbon will have to be, as suggested by the IPCC modeling, for example, around 81,000 euros per ton of CO2 saved in order to make sure that everybody fully decarbonize its way of life of production by that time. But there is a very high uncertainty. There exist other models that say in 2050 we will have the technologies to produce electricity for the entire economy at a cost which is not different from what it is today. Well, the difficulty is the last 20% of decarbonization. We almost know already today how to reduce emission by 50–80%. The real difficulty for the last 20%. It's good to have politicians to create the collective ambition like zero emission net emission by the year 2050. But in reality, it's true that we should also prepare for Plan B, where the technologies to do that full decarbonization will not be there, or will be there but will be too costly for the people. In that case, we should accept that this objective is not attainable. But we cannot say that on the political forum.
Thank you, Christian. You're staying with us as it's time now to bring all four the panelists in the discussion, starting with Valérie. Valérie, what a green journey since the Paris Agreement was reached in 2016 for the asset management industry. It seems much has been done since the Paris Agreement, but yet there's still much to be done. So as a global asset manager, how does Amundi position itself in this sort of in-between situation?
Well, Amundi is, we manage roughly 1.7 trillion euros, more than $2 trillion. So we know that the choices we make have an impact because of the size we represent. When Amundi was created a bit more than 10 years ago, one of our key pillars was responsible investment, which was quite unique at the time and part of our DNA. But it's really in 2018 that we made a very strong commitment that no other asset management companies in the world has made until now. And the commitment was in 3 years, by 2021, we will include ESG target in all our open-ended funds. Saying it like that, it looks very simple. In reality, it's incredibly difficult. It's a question of strong and heavy change management. Change management in the culture, in the process, in IT, in our legal procedures. And we're very proud today to say that 100% of our open-ended funds are including ESG targets. And once again, because we're big, this is counting. To answer your question, I think that as a global asset manager, we have 3 main roles. The first one is to send a message to the companies, because they know that we will overweight those companies which are having a strong commitment in terms of their environmental and social impacts, and underweight the other ones. The second role we have is, and this is very important, to really engage a dialogue and to vote on behalf of our clients and participate to all these assemblies to encourage ambitious models. And the third one is very concrete. It's to fill the gap between the supply and demand. I mean, we're still lacking a number of investment underlying to realize this transition. And in addition, of course, we raise our voice in order to convince. We explicit our engagement in terms of the net zero trajectories that was mentioned for 2050. And we also spend time trying to convince our clients, the asset owners, about it.
So you're raising your voice. What are your expectations, recommendations for the upcoming COP26?
Alors, of course, the COPs originally and historically, the goal was to mobilize states and protect our climate system. The COP21, as we discussed it earlier, was really an incredible step, because we now have a common goal, which is to secure our net zero emissions route until 2050. So on the one hand, this COP21 was a real diplomatic success, for sure, and it has changed minds. The man on the street, the financial industry, the corporates. But on the other hand, as of today, it's a bit disappointing, because it has changed minds, but not so much actions. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question about the COP26, I actually have personally 2 expectations. The first one, of course, is that we have further and more countries committing themselves, because it's not a question for part of the world only. But the second one, which is even more important for me, is the fact that we make commitment, states make commitment, and all the stakeholders around make commitments on the shorter terms. Mm-hmm. One of the problems today is that all the responsible who are taking a commitment for 2050 will not be here anymore in 2050. I will be close to 80 years old in 2050. And I think we need, as decision makers, make commitment for 2025 and 2030. And for me, that would be the great step of COP26.
Thank you, Valérie. Similarly to asset managers, banks have also a preponderant role to play in the energy transition. So, Lorenzo, where does Société Générale stand today in that movement of energy transition, of financing the energy transition?
Well, first, good morning, good afternoon to everybody. Sorry for being far away, but it's nice to be able to engage. Of course, banks have a key role to play in this process, because especially in a bank-centric system like the European one, banks are at the heart of the financing process. So we have been playing. This is not new. We have been playing for years a role in trying to accelerate the process. And I have to say that French banks in general have been playing a leadership role in this respect. Now, we need to accelerate the process, that's clear, in view of the 2050 deadlines, but which require, as was mentioned, shorter term commitments. And we need to create, to broaden the group and the support in the financial world for this endeavor. Now, to be concrete, what do we do as a bank? What does Société Générale do? I think we can do, we do actually at least four things. First, we align our balance sheet to the objectives. So basically financing. We have clear and transparent financing transition to try to get out of the, in particular, of the green, of the brown sector, starting from coal, of course, and so on and so forth. Second, which is also very important, is to help our clients. So giving advice to our clients how to themselves best transition, trying to devise tailor-made solutions, investment solutions for them that are consistent with their target. And there are a full range of solutions that we can provide. And fourth, try to build up, as I mentioned, the team effort. So creating coalitions of participants, market participants, financial institutions, to develop principles for responsible banking in particular is a big initiative. Also to try to get to common standards, which is the biggest challenge, I think, globally in the financial sector, that can help companies to understand where the good standard, the best practices are, and how to align themselves with these practices. So there are quite a lot of areas and instruments that we can use to help our clients, to help the real economy direct itself in this transition process that needs to be implemented very rapidly.
Lorenzo, there is a question that almost every investor is asking himself today. It's almost a Shakespearean question, I would say. That question is, to divest or not to divest fossil fuel sectors? What is your stance on this?
I think the key word, in my view, and it has been mentioned earlier, is transition. Is to define a credible transition. I think I mean, as they say in Latin, natura non facit saltum. Nature doesn't jump. You need a transition. You need an ambitious transition, a transparent transition, and something that is understood by all. And now we have ourselves started, of course, to decarbonize very rapidly, but we need to have a common effort so that nobody's penalized from running too fast. You are penalized if you go too slowly, and you know what the end game is, and you know the steps. I mean, we know that in order to get to 2050, we need clear commitments by 2030, and we ourselves, in order to do that, need to have clear commitments by 2025 and clear actions. And this has to be transparent. It has to be in the even in the remuneration policy. So it has to be a target that our CEO has to know that if he doesn't reach it, he will not get his full bonus. So it is a holistic approach, I would say, that boards have to adopt, policymakers have to adopt, and and managers have to help contribute to implement.
So Lorenzo was mentioning coalitions earlier. Philippe, I'm thinking of La Banque Postale, who has recently joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance. Philippe, how does that fit your green strategy at La Banque Postale?
It's a very important piece, but let me highlight that this is only one component, because the broad strategy of La Banque Postale is to follow what we call the just transition. And let me share with you that just this morning, we revealed the purpose of La Banque Postale, and we announced that we will become a mission-led company. So let me be more explicit. We strive to follow three objectives. So we want, of course, to be green. We want also to be aware of all social, local impacts, and to have a 360 view of our global impacts on society. This is the first element. The starting point of our policy regarding environment is very well known. We are already neutral on our operational perimeter. We will, let's say, achieve the net zero 10 years in advance, so until 2040. And La Banque Postale Group, encompassing CNP Assurance, our target is to invest 25 billion euros into renewables by 2023. So this is, I would say, a commitment that is widely recognized by extra financial rating agencies. And we will continue in that direction. And maybe to be a little bit more explicit, we announced this morning that we will profoundly change the way we manage credit. So we will complement the traditional methodology of considering risk, profitability, compliance matters, at what we call the global impact factor or global impact rating. That will be integrated in the way we grant credit or we decide investment. So this is a proprietary tool we will integrate in our credit committee. This is a way for us to be in this trajectory of following the just transition. So this is of paramount importance. But what you mentioned, the net zero banking alliance, is just one element of a broader strategy.
And so when it comes to financing the green transition concretely, what role does LBP play within the European financial landscape? I mean, we've heard earlier about French banks having some leadership in that area. What is the role of LBP there?
The role of LBP, we intend to be, we are a young bank. We've been creating 15 years ago. Our intention is to, let's say, to lead the pack in the sense that we are very, let's say, ambitious in the way we select our, let's say, credits, the way we finance local authorities. You know, we are the main contributors to the financing of local authorities with a market share of 25%. So this is for us an element, a very significant element in our strategy. We do participate, of course, to the debate with the European Commission, and maybe we will continue this discussion on that topic. We are convinced that there is still a lot of work to be done on the taxonomy. The system is very complex. We need, this is clearly positive that the European Commission and Europe is also on that matter leading the pack, but we see a risk of competition, a risk of confusion, for example, with other regions of the world, risk of confusion because when you consider the proposal of the European Commission, when you consider that you need 400 articles to decide what is green and what is not, clearly we are at a level of complexity that is, let's say, not explainable for the market. And for us, this is an element of concern.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thierry, I'm turning to you. The Paris Financial Place obviously has a quite robust green expertise. Which elements, in your view, should Paris EUROPLACE bring forward in light of the upcoming COP26 conference?
Thank you. And first, I think over the last 5 years, Paris EUROPLACE, through Finance for Tomorrow, has been really focusing bringing public sector issuers and financial institutions around to transform the awareness into a commitment and thereafter a real operationalized approach to basically financing the transition. And I think we we want to remain very pragmatic as a financial place, as a facilitator of this transition, but can be a real driver as well, given the commitment of the asset owners in particular, but also of the other institutions. So for COP26 is really a step forward in terms of really trying to bring forward a number of things that have been successful for Paris EUROPLACE. The first I would mention is the Sustainable Finance Observatory that we've developed over a year ago that allows the entire financial place to showcase its transformation, really showing the commitments and the results. And I think this effort of transparency has been recognized, and it is something that we believe should be brought to the rest of the world and our European neighbors, and to really create a level playing field for all the institutions across the globe. And that's one important aspect in terms of driving transformation. The second one was actually earlier this year initiated by Olivia Grégoire, our junior minister, in relation to impact finance. I mean, obviously, when we think about the Paris Accord, we only think about climate, but it's climate, it's social, it's everything else. And so there is a task force that has been put together earlier this year to really also try to operationalize impact practices, providing guides to people, because we all know that eventually, although everybody may be committed, especially at the asset owner level, it takes quite a little bit of time for the money to actually flow through the pipes of the economy. And this is often not because of no willingness on the part of the financial institutions, but because companies perhaps are not ready for it, the regulation is perhaps not ready for it. And that's quite important to remain very pragmatic in terms of what we do. So impact finance will be an important topic. And the last, which has been mentioned, which is actually an initiative led by Amundi, which is the Just and Fair Transition Coalition. Because we should never forget that the social impact of the transition actually do need to be dealt with and really tackled in a way where we can avoid some of the past errors, not too recently. And so it's quite important as well to bring that coalition to COP26 to raise the awareness, because I think this is a very special topic for Paris and perhaps for Brussels, but not elsewhere around the world.
Getting back to your point on companies that may not be ready for the green transition, do you feel there is enough support, enough incentives today for those companies to get on with the green transition?
Today, regulation is going in the right direction in relation to disclosure, for example. But it's also very difficult to take a simple example of a small company with 50 people to be able to prepare the perfect report to be able to satisfy its bank or its insurer that it is green. So the real question when you come to the real economy, it's not so easy to know how to support small companies, small businesses in particular. I mean, the large ones, they have the means to get organized and to focus on issuing their green bonds or having their proper policies in terms of ESG, transforming their industrial tools to save carbon, to save water, to save whatever. But for small companies, which in particular in France represent quite a large part of employment, it is very, very difficult. So we still have to find a way for Paris EUROPLACE, but also government and other institutions to provide the sort of push, but also support and guide. And a number of industry associations are trying to do so, but perhaps more public sector focus on the help versus just the money.
So Valérie, Thierry has just highlighted that Amundi initiative on the fair transition, but there is a question that comes around, which is about how can the financial sector operate a fair transition and at the same time offset all the possibly negative impacts that could incur?
Well, this is true that the green transition has collateral effects. The pace of the energy transition must be confronted to three important dimensions. The first one, it's employment. We know very well that, especially in the fossil fuel industry, we have millions of people employed in this industry, both in developed and in emerging markets, and this is obviously a concern. The second one, it was mentioned previously, it's the buying power of consumers. What is at stake is that we need consumers to be able to reach an affordable energy, of course. And the third one, which is very important, is the geopolitical balance of power and the question of national interests in these questions. We should not be naive and get into a green transition without thinking about the consequences for our national interests. Of course, I'm speaking about nuclear power, for instance, if we speak about France. Or we can take the example of the car industry, where we see that we had obviously a very good aim in getting very quickly to electrical cars, but at the same time we let half of the added value of the car industry in the batteries in China. So it's extremely important when we speak about green transition and about all we have to implement in the next 30 years, to be very conscious at the same time of the social impacts that we have locally and globally. So that's why Thierry was kindly reminding at Amundi we really fight for a fair transition. We think that the green transition can only happen if it is socially acceptable. Now, what is our role as an asset manager in this kind of way? We absolutely have to. I mean, we have to consider. We have to remind that we are in the middle between investors or clients who are giving us money to manage and companies in which we must invest and find the right balance between the two, and being very careful, not getting into very simple policy in terms of reducing or cancelling some investments in some companies. On the other hand, this is the companies who have to work more that we need to finance. So one of our important roles, which is not so much seen but which is key, is to make sure that we reinforce the dialogue with the corporates, understand perfectly what are their hurdles, and also explain them to the investors or clients to make sure we can go into the right direction and to deal with this fair transition. Another thing I wanted to add, as a chairwoman of the investor committee of Paris EUROPLACE, we are working also on the social taxonomy. Philippe was mentioning the nightmare green taxonomy we have to deal with, and we must work in advance and early to make sure that our social taxonomy will be a clever one and an easier one. And we have a strong role at Paris EUROPLACE in raising our voice.
That led me to Philippe. Philippe, I'm getting back to your point on effectively green taxonomy and what you mentioned earlier, the confusion about a green taxonomy. But do you see some room for cooperation there emerging from all those possible green framework that we might see emerging from the UK, the US, Asia, or whatever country? Do you think there might be
No, that's a clear issue. Yes, do you hear me?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, excuse me. No, this is a key issue because we have to be sure that as a global bank, a global institution, we, La Banque Postale through CNP or our asset management arm, we operate in 13 countries. You need rules that can be applied globally, and that's very important. So rules that are only valid for Europe could be an issue when you want to distribute your products abroad. Clearly, it could be clearly difficult for you to address the situation. So at the end of the day, I think that those subjects will need to be discussed in a multilateral area where, I mean, we put, let's say, we set common principles that are shared between many regions, between Europe, US, and Asia. I think this is very important because if it's not the case, we will see regional rules, and for all global institutions, it will be a nightmare to apply.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Thierry, I'm just thinking about another point which is very important in climate transition and green transition, which is data. I was with some investors last week who were telling me about the lack of data today as to sustainable finance and green transition. How does Meridiam cope with these challenges of data in climate transition and sustainable finance?
And as Meridiam, but we're not the size of the balance sheet of Amundi, so it's much easier for us to do it. We actually created our own methodology to create the data. So we are quite able to measure the temperature of our portfolios, which is actually something developed with La Banque Postale and a number of other institutions in Paris. We're also able to measure the impact within the framework of the UN SDG of our portfolio, so social, biodiversity, and a number of pillars that we've selected. Data is quite important for investors and asset owners generally because that is how they measure performance. Mm-hmm. And if we really want to be perfect in this whole drive and incentive for the asset owners, is that eventually the regulators should take into account in the prudential approach the fact that you're doing the right thing and investing in the right thing, and therefore data will be necessary because I don't think you can deal with any of these actuaries without a lot of data to, for example, favor lower capital charges for fair transition investment versus others. But at the moment, we're far away from having enough data to go in that direction, which will be the ultimate incentive for asset owners. So this is where we have to go. Yep. And it's also very important for companies to understand which data they have to provide. And
you were mentioning regulators. Do you think that we're lacking of clarity upon regulation?
I mean, it's to me the clarity of regulation. I usually say the best is the enemy of the good. So don't ask for things that you don't wish for. And it's work in progress. And yes, I regret that today we only have a green taxonomy, which is quite complex. We don't have a social taxonomy, and we don't have over taxonomy, and we should have a comprehensive view of life. But we just, given the time pressure, I think it's also this dialogue between the regulators, the EU, and the private sector that has to remain constant to make it work. And I think the Commission is quite open to that. In a way, if you bring data back and you are able to engage in a dialogue with them, I think every other year or so we'll be able to improve the taxonomy.
Thank you, Thierry. Lorenzo, another challenge for financial companies has been on their climate strategies during general meetings, the famous Say on Climate. My question there would be, how do you convince your shareholders, the public opinion, and as well your teams that you are on the right green path with your plans?
Yeah, if I can a few seconds to also answer the regulatory.
Of course.
As a bank, I cannot resist to say that the worst is the uncertainty. And what I fear is that regulators don't know yet where they want to go, but they are threatening to add on things, which creates uncertainty, and in the end discourages may or create obstacles for banks to really help the recovery in this phase. So my message here would be to be very prudent and to talk only when things are clear, rather than sending very general messages. Now, the same applies, I think, to bank clarity, transparency, consistency with the final goal. So if you show how your strategy is consistent with the overall goals, then I think investors understand. But you need to be very proactive. I think that's where I would conclude. You need to be proactive with investors, with NGOs, with stakeholders, even with the staff, I would say, because the staff are the first interface with the client, with the society in general. So we need, I think, as a financial institution, to make an effort to use all the communication channels to reduce this uncertainty. And I would make an appeal again to try to build together this transition, making sure that we are all on the same path at the same pace. That's very important.
Christian, maybe one question about the acceptation of the climate strategies, especially by the NGOs and by the public opinion. How can financial companies and corporates in general achieve that, in your view? What will be needed?
Well, very interesting discussion here. I concur with the common point made by the different panelists that we need to make things clearer, more transparent. We need to get more data, and that's difficult. I mean, remember, it took more than 2 centuries to put in place accounting system for purely monetary dimension of economic activities. And here we are talking about green accounting, carbon accounting. It's probably even more difficult to counting carbon atoms than euros or dollars. And so it will take time to put in place a commonly accepted green accounting system. And it's definitely crucial. The debate about the taxonomy clearly demonstrates that, when you try to use things in a non-quantitative way, there is such a huge potential of disagreement that it's a very difficult road. So we need to clarify what are the objectives, what are the instruments of measure, and that will take time.
Thank you, Christian. A question for all participants now. You will have to take an increasing number of climate-related decisions in the following years on your board. And my question there is, do you feel that your companies are ready to face this upcoming wave of climate-related decisions? Maybe starting with Philippe at La Banque Postale.
I think that the level of awareness in the board is clearly increasing. If I may say so, all boards are on board. And I will say that if we must go further, that is also why we decided to change our company purpose and to follow the roots of a mission-led company. And all decision-making process become clear-cut. When you have a company purpose that sets your strategic commitment. So this is the way we embark our board and we embark all our teams.
Thank you, Philippe. Valérie, same question?
Yes, no, I fully agree. Obviously, our boards are more than ready. They are not only ready, they are pushing. I think they are fully convinced of what is at stake right now, and especially obviously for Amundi, whose main shareholder is Crédit Agricole Group, and the project of the Crédit Agricole is very strong in that regards. And if I may, I would like to add just one small point about the data.
Please go ahead.
Because Thierry answered it very rightly, but I think we need to add as well that it is a sovereignty issue, the data issue. It's very important for the financial industry because we need them to work. It's very complicated for the corporates, and we have to take into account because everybody is asking a lot of data to deal with them. But at the end of the day, it's incredibly important that we keep the sovereignty on this data, especially in Europe, and we strongly support the fact that we have this sort of central database where we could all work on that data, who will be our own data.
Just on that data, shall we fear that might be concentrated in some hands, especially in the US, about the data?
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
Thierry, some question for the climate decisions on your board, on Meridian's board. I think it's even more important.
No, I think we have been taking climate-related decisions for 5 years now. So, but the real issue is to keep training your board because, as much as, we were able 3 or 4 years ago to make decisions based on scope 1, 2, 3 of carbon, now we are talking about physical risk and adaptation, which is another aspect of things. So it's really complex. So I think one should not underestimate the fact that you have to just keep training decision makers in relation to climate because, as Valérie said, data is important, but understanding is also very important.
Thank you, Thierry. Lorenzo, some questions on your board at Société Générale. How do you see those climate-related decisions happening?
A committee, a specialized committee, to deal with climate or ESG issues, but to take all these issues in the board as a whole. Except when there are specific issues related to remuneration or risk. But the whole board has to be aware of climate and ESG issues. And this has been a decision which I think may be different from others, but we think that this is not just an issue for specialists. It's an issue for the whole board, and we need to take, each decision has to be filtered through these criteria.
Thank you, Lorenzo. Christian, your final word on those climate-related decisions. Do you see corporates, when you discuss with them, do you see corporates being ready to face those green transition and those climate-related decisions that they will have to make in the coming years?
For CEOs, like for any other person, I see a lot of motivation. I understand in particular that in Europe, most people are very sensitive to the issue of climate change. We are now on board, all realizing that if we don't do something, we will face very badly our responsibility toward future generation. The problem today is that there are not many well-structured way of thinking the issue of how to reorganize society to make sure that all the actions that are socially desirable are implemented. And so I'm very glad to talk to CEOs here and there with politicians, with the Prime Minister and the President last week, for example, explaining that carbon pricing is inevitably the solution. One way or another, we will have to go there, and that's the way to explain, to understand what is green and desirable and what is non-green or not socially desirable.
Thank you, Christian. I think it's now time to wrap up these sessions. Lots of hope, lots of expectations for the COP26 coming in Glasgow. No doubt the Paris Financial Centre will know how to raise its voice and will have its words there in Glasgow. Thanks a lot to all our panelists today, and thank you to Paris EUROPLACE for this event.